in December 2015 after just 18 months into his tenure. For more on this story, we're joined by our reporter Mzwandile Mbeje. He's in Parktown. Mzwandile, we're getting closer to the time. What is happening now?
Thank you very much, Desiree. Indeed, we're getting closer to the time. And of course, there are a number of people who are very interested in what is happening here. And the DA, which is one of the original complainants in terms of the state capture issue, is here. So with me is David Mbeje, the spokesperson on finance for the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance. I just want to find out, so why he's here, so what is his take, what is he expecting? Hi, David. So Minister Nene will be here, your spokesperson on finance. Just give us your take.
Well, in about 15 minutes, the Minister of Finance, Nhlanhla Nene, is set to give evidence. And of course, what we're interested in will be his evidence relating to the weeks and days before he was fired on the 9th of December 2015. I think there's a second aspect that we're interested in. For the last few months, there have been swirling rumors and allegations that the minister may have had meetings or a relationship with the Guptas. And I hope that the minister will use this as an opportunity to set out all the facts openly. And I suspect that he's been waiting for this opportunity to do exactly that.
As the DA, is there anything that you know that perhaps you want the minister to speak on?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, we certainly don't have personal knowledge of these allegations relating to the Guptas, but I do think it's important. Just precisely because, I mean, the minister is not just any minister in cabinet, he is the Minister of Finance. I think for that reason he needs to be absolutely clear. He needs to take the public into his confidence and set out all the facts, if indeed these allegations are true at all. And I certainly hope the minister takes the opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much, David. In less than 15 minutes, we'll get to know exactly what the minister will tell the nation. And of course, there's also other people really who are looking at this and analyzing the events that have been taking place. One of those analysts, Kaya Stole, has been speaking on a number of social issues affecting our country. And of course, he's here to also observe and watch what's happening. So what do you expect will come out of this testimony of Minister Nene?
I think for me, the testimony today will probably be a balance of absolution. And when we talk about absolution, it's really probably the first time that the minister is going to come out and explain in detail how his engagement with the Guptas worked out. But also there might be an opportunity for us to discover the nature of the conversations that he used to have. And I think what becomes quite important, as David Mbeje said, is that this is not just any ordinary ministry. It is essentially the centerpiece of our democracy. And of course, if there were external parties that were trying to interfere with the running of the affairs of that particular organization, it is something that is definitely in the public interest. But of course, we also know that, the events leading up to December 2015 have never been fully ventilated out in public, and the two primary players, being the minister and his then boss at the time, former President Jacob Zuma, have never really explained what it is that led to the decision for him being recalled. And of course, there have been bits and pieces that we've been getting throughout those particular couple of years that have elapsed. And I think today, perhaps we're going to get a much better insight into what really went down. And also really the critical question of whether he was dismissed as a result of his resistance to the pet projects that President Jacob Zuma wanted, and what the nature of those pet projects are. And I think also it will give us an opportunity to move away from the speculation that has dominated the national narrative since then, because reality here is that in the absence of hardcore evidence, it's really just all speculation. And of course, it's probably the one person who has something that amounts to some form of evidence that can be taken seriously.
This is one of the most crucial portfolios in cabinet and, of course, in the country. In terms of the international community, do you think they are watching this? Do you think the markets are taking note, given that the Minister of Finance is quite important?
Yeah, they definitely will be taking an interest, because I think for them, it will give them insights into really how stable and how strong and how robust the controls within that particular treasury are. And if, of course, it really just comes out that perhaps our controls that we have in order to maintain the integrity of the treasury are not that up to scratch, it will really put us in a bad light to the international international community. So what you really want to be able to establish is if there are these particular loopholes in really how people can possibly interfere with the running of our affairs of the Treasury, what is it that we need to do to ensure that this doesn't happen ever again? So I think it will also be a learning lesson for the country at large to say, well, actually, now that we know that there are these possible areas that really need to be strengthened, how do we make sure that they do become strengthened? Because politicians may evolve, but they're all the same.
As someone who analyzes events and you've been looking at all these things happening, so what does this do, for example, to the governing party? I know they've been at pains to say the governing party is not at trial here, but most of the individuals that are here, if not all, so are members of the party. So what does it do to the governing party?
Well, of course, it is an absolute disaster for the African National Congress because essentially everybody that formed part of the state capture tapestry and the state capture fabric was in one way or another linked to the African National Congress. Now, whether they then want to distance themselves and say that that person was acting in his capacity as a government representative rather than as a party representative, it really does become a matter of semantics because, for example, if somebody like Nhlanhla Nene was going to be removed as finance minister, the ANC's own deployment committee would have been part of that conversation to say, now who do we put in? So they can't now suddenly pretend that they're completely detached from the goings-on that happen within the government architecture itself. But I think also for them, they really should start embracing this process as really as the part that aids into their renewal message. So we keep hearing that the ANC talks about renewal, but you never really get an understanding of what it is that they acknowledge, that they identify as things that need to be renewed. And of course, if one of the issues that needs to be deliberated on is really this conflation between what the party wants and what is in the best interest of the state, then that's perhaps a conversation that they need to start having. And I think also, when you look at us heading into the 25th year of the democracy, the 5th general election, the ANC also needs to start acknowledging that perhaps the way it sort of framed its governance architecture when it came into power 24, 25 years ago probably is no longer fit for purposes in some respects. And of course, for them, they really need to start moving to a position of saying that occasionally we will go out into the country at large and say, this is the best person for this particular position in spite of their political affiliation. And I think over the past 24 years, that hasn't been the case. And of course, in some instances, good talent has been left out and not been embraced by the political party simply because you're not a card-carrying member. And of course, if you're trying to run a country, that is something that you occasionally have to actually look beyond.
In conclusion, so what do you think? Maybe let me phrase it differently. The evidence that has been presented so far, do you think it can lead to any prosecution as far as you have watched the events?
Look, it can. The possibility always exists that somebody will take it up and say, let me build a case out of this. But whether it will happen, I'm far more skeptical. And I think also we must remember that the tendency in South Africa is that as soon as there is a commission of inquiry, there is then this presumption by the other law enforcement agencies that they can sit out the process and simply observe. But of course, that is not the way it's supposed to be. Things are supposed to be running in parallel. But of course, what then also might be one way in which they look at it is that they say maybe if we wait until the commission is over, then we'll gather even more evidence, we'll gather even more information rather than us acting prematurely. But of course, in instances where there's clear evidence that something needs to be acted upon, you have to wonder why they'd wait until the commission ends. And of course, we never know when this commission itself is going to end because you might then discover that even more witnesses want to come out. You prolong the length of this particular conversation, it means that the justice that we should be pursuing in other avenues also gets delayed for as long as people believe that you need to wait for the commission to end.
Thank you very much, Kaya. That's Kaya Sithole, the analyst, really giving us his take and the analysis of the events unfolding here at the commission. And of course, the Minister of Finance will be the person to take the stand, and everyone is really watching very closely as the Ministry of Finance, or rather the Minister of Finance, is one of the important ministers in the country.
Thanks a lot there to Mzwandile Mbeje.
Yeah, 10 o'clock, we'll go back to Parktown when the testimony resumes or kicks off.